Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, who you gonna call? Jason Reitman to reboot this franchise again. This is Ghostbusters. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like 2016's Ghostbusters, which we'll be talking about today.
Here we go.
No potential controversy surrounding this movie, just a straightforward reboot of a franchise that nobody seemed to mind.
Just kind of snuck out. Nobody saw it coming or had anything to say in anticipation of it.
No strong opinions ahead of it.
Not at all.
Of course, this is a famously controversial movie, and not to spoil too much, but we really don't understand why.
No.
But before we get into that, Ian, how you doing this week?
I have fun news. I got a big new TV, which is very exciting for me as a movie watching person that doesn't leave the house. I'm going to be able to see them on a bigger, brighter TV. But the bad news is I'm on day 3 of cleaning out the dust and all the old stuff that was piled up in my TV stand because I can't bear the idea of putting this beautiful new baby into a dirty old cradle. So my apartment is currently destroyed by the fallout of this project. There's stuff everywhere, cables and components and old Xboxes and computers.
All this from just dusting a TV stand?
You know, there was a lot of stuff in it that I didn't use. An old surround sound system. There's speakers wired all around the living room. I could have just put the new TV on top of all the old junk.
You should get those speakers hooked up though, man. The big TV with the surround sound, that's the way to do it.
Do people even use surround sounds anymore? I feel like this is all antique equipment.
It's all about the sound bars nowadays. That's what I've got, and I love it. You still get the vibe of the surround sound without all the wires running everywhere.
That's what I thought. They do it by magic now, so I don't want wires. And I never turned it on because I hate making noise, and I hate when my neighbors make noise. So my biggest hope, which I didn't even check before getting this TV, is that my new TV supports Bluetooth headphones because that's how I want to hear my
It's got to.
movies.
If it's a TV made within the last 10 years, there's got to be an option to hook up headphones to it somehow.
I'm counting on that.
So that's exciting, though. You've been watching all these big spectacle movies on a little laptop for the longest time, right? Or a tablet?
I'm really shortchanging these directors. They would be so pissed at me.
Just like Denis Villeneuve always wanted Ian to watch his $300 million sci-fi epic on a tablet.
On a $60 Amazon tablet that's subsidized with ads across Paul Atreides' face.
That's the Fire, right? I've got that one.
Yeah.
I never use it because I have a large TV and a soundbar.
It's better. I'm moving up.
I'm very excited for you, though. Watching these movies on a big TV, I think, is going to only improve your experience.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't wait to rewatch Dune, which we're getting set to talk about soon.
Spoiler alert. I liked it.
Shocker.
So you got to tell me, Ian, what have you been watching lately? Anything you wanted to tell the listeners about? We've been watching a lot of horror movies lately, so.
I switched gears. Blasttober is in the rearview mirror, and this week we're talking about a story with strong female protagonists. So I did something that ties in. I started watching the new limited series Made on Netflix with Margaret Qualley, old friend of the pod. She was the enigmatic missing heroine, Amelia, in The Nice Guys.
Yep. Also in The Leftovers, which was one of my favorite shows of the past 10 years.
Oh, cool. See, I never got to see her in that. I saw her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where she was a challenging, interesting character, but I thought her performance was great.
Yep. Playing like a Mansonite, right?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, she's a total star. She carries Made. It's awesome. Other people are great in it too. Really good performances. It's this really poignant and moving story. But at the same time, it's funny. And it has this really sharp social commentary built into it about domestic abuse, about the cost of poverty. Anyway, I'm 3 episodes into it and I'm just loving it. I think it's great.
I have been meaning to check it out. I've heard good things from a few people now, and an Ian's stamp of approval goes further than most. So I will definitely add it to my list, but my list is growing.
I know.
Keep getting bogged down with stuff. I still haven't watched Squid Game. Got to get on that.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're almost to the point where you could just not and say you did and just forget about it. Everyone's tired of talking about it.
I know so much about it already, just from memes and Twitter discourse that I can pretty much guess where it goes.
Yeah.
And I still haven't finished Reservation Dogs. That's another one on my list.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah, I loved that. Super good. That and Made are 2 of my favorite discoveries of this year.
Yeah, they feel important, if nothing else does, that I actually get around to watching them. But, you know, Succession's back, so that's one night of my week just swallowed up already. And then I had to finally go and check out the 2018 Halloween, the David Gordon Green version. I watched it with every intention of watching Halloween Kills on Halloween night. But then I remembered Halloween was on a Sunday and Succession is a Sunday night show, and I'm on the East Coast and I can't stay up that late.
No.
So I watched Succession and went to bed. But I liked the 2018 Halloween. I wouldn't say I loved it. There's a lot of Michael Myers being like a little trickster in it. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't.
There's this thing that popped up a lot in some of the middle sequels of Halloween where he's like a real trickster.
Oh.
He likes to set little traps for people in like a mean way where he hides a body in a creative place where it will scare somebody even more so, or, just setting little traps, which kind of goes against what I remember of him from that early Carpenter movie and the sequel where he's just like walking in a straight line with a knife, and if you get in his way, he's going to get you.
Now that you say that, I watched the original recently, and he does set up the body to fall out of the linen closet and dangle in front of Jamie Lee Curtis in a weird way that was totally unnecessary.
Yeah. Oh, he always had these little...
There was a seed of that.
He's always been a little prankster at heart, which is very evil pranksts, but...
He's still that little kid in the clown suit at heart.
Yeah, but I did like most of the movie. It was appropriately brutal. Some good kills, as we like to discuss on the pod.
We love a good kill on the pod.
Love a good kill. Two of probably the most annoying characters in the movie are podcasters, which I thought was a nice touch. But it's a nice angle that, it is like a crime somebody would make a podcast about 40 years later. So that kind of lended some modern day credibility to it. And the movie hints they may have been responsible for his resurgence in killing people, which...
Oh, man.
Don't put that on the podcasters, man. We're benevolent.
That's a lot, yeah.
We just want to talk about stuff. We're not trying to cause any murders, mostly.
If we can avoid it. Hey, speaking of, we didn't talk about how are you doing?
Oh, me. I'm good. I took a trip. I've been taking a lot of trips lately. I feel like every week on the pod, I'm always talking about where I went, but I think I'm done now.
Yeah.
Took a big family vacation. A lot of COVID tests involved when you're traveling these days.
All right, yeah.
But I got a little tan. I ate a lot of food.
Nice.
Drank a lot of drinks. Still feeling the ramifications. You're always sluggish after a marathon eating and drinking for a week.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm trying to get back in the groove of things. I believe this is our first recording since I got back. So we haven't been in the booth recording an episode about a movie in 2 weeks, 3 weeks almost.
It feels like a long time, and all the ones we did before that were Last-tober specials, so it feels like we're turning a page and going back to something very old and different for us.
Yeah, luckily there's nothing spooky in this movie. No ghosts, no goblins, no ghouls.
Yeah, we thought ahead. We're definitely going to be done with ghosts and not want anything scary in November.
Well, we did have to do this one now because we're trying to tie it into the release of Ghostbusters Afterlife. So there is a method to our madness a little bit, but it did work out in a funny way that our first episode post-Blastober is the 2016 Ghostbusters.
It's spooky too, isn't it?
It is spooky. It's a little spooky the way everything happened. And the movie's a little spooky.
Yeah.
Not very spooky. It's got a few scares and some key spots.
They try.
Nothing that's going to keep you up at night, but there's some tension building up throughout the movie, right?
It's very much in the style of the original. That movie scared me as a kid, and this one attempts basically the same moves.
Yeah. What did you think of this movie when it came out? It was obviously a movie that had a lot of, I guess, controversy is just the way to put it, but there's a lot of people talking about this movie that had not seen a frame of it, probably even before the movie was into filming. This movie was a hot button issue. Did you interact with any of that discourse at all? Were you aware of it as it was going on? What was your impression of this movie?
I think I was aware of it just to the extent that I'm an online person, but I was like, that sounds dumb to me. This is a comedy spoof movie, and changing something, trying a twist is exactly what you would want people to do with the reboot, especially for a classic movie. Like, why would you want to just do the same movie with different people? And what do you think you're doing with it? So anyway, I was like, I'm not going to listen to a lot of that. But I didn't make it out to theaters. I waited till it came home, and then I watched it. And I'm like, oh, that was pretty fun. And then I just pretty much forgot about it. Like, the content of this movie is not controversial. It will not throw you for a loop at all.
Right. When you watch it, it feels like all this was much ado about nothing. It is not worthy of the scorn it earned. I don't think it's a great movie either. It's fun. It's fine. It sticks with you for as long as the runtime. And once it's done, it's gone. It's in one ear and out the other. And that's fine. You made a good point, and something that I think is important when you're talking about these reboots of these franchises is how much reverence do you need to show to these original movies when you're redoing it? Do you want to just retread the original? Do you want to do what it looks like Afterlife is doing, where you just treat those original movies and characters with such kid gloves that you almost can't do anything special with them? Like, a lot of the backlash around Afterlife right now, because it's not getting good reviews, is that it's just like, you can tell they really liked the original Ghostbusters, but what else does this movie have to say?
Coming up with something to say is hard. And this reboot, it's pretty faithful. For anyone who was like, oh, they're dishonoring the memory and the spirit and the intention of the first movie, they're not. They are very respectful of it. They have an incredible number of nods to it. They're actually actually way too respectful in terms of they decided that they needed to include the entire cast of the original Ghostbusters, at least the surviving cast. And they just went out of their way to get everybody to show up and wave at you and go, hey, remember Ghostbusters? It was fun, right? And that's actually brings the movie down because it's like a little bit too much fan service and prior movie service.
Yeah, I found it more distracting than anything to have all the actors from Ghostbusters show up as characters that are different from their role in Ghostbusters. At that point, like you said, it's just them showing up and waving and pointing a big neon sign over their head like, remember me? And some of the cameos work better than others. But yeah, we have to say, without a doubt, some of the controversy around this movie was in bad faith and was just because, you know, it was headlined by women, right? There's no arguing that. That has to be at least part of it.
Yeah, I don't understand the argument, but that's got to be the source of it. It's just, no, my Ghostbusters are men. And then I have some other feelings about women in society and how gender roles are changing and evolving. And talking about this movie triggers my pain about how I can't deal with where society's going. And so I'm going to take it out on this movie. That's my psychoanalysis of the haters.
That's not to say you can't be critical of this movie in good faith and have actual gripes with it. But when you're going and giving it 1-star reviews before filming is even wrapped, or, you know, it's the most disliked film trailer in YouTube history.
Got to question the intentions.
You got to question where is this coming from and why. So we don't want the whole episode to be about this because it's been spoken about and examined by much smarter people than we. We're here to talk movies. So do you want to talk about this movie?
Yeah. Can you tell us how this thing happened?
Sure. It's kind of a winding road, so I'm going to leave some stuff out, lest we be here for as long as we were with Ishtar.
Okay.
But we can always fill in the blanks later. All right, so Ghostbusters is one of the most beloved movies of the 20th century. The sequel, Ghostbusters 2, was released in 1989, and while a commercial success, was not quite the cultural lightning rod the original was. Plans for a third movie were difficult to pin down as Aykroyd waffled between being enthusiastic about another entry to saying in an August 1993 interview with Playboy that Ghostbusters was, quote, the one I don't think will necessarily further exploit.
Aykroyd said no to an exploitation film.
In 1996, Harold Ramis confirmed Aykroyd was working on a script focusing on a younger team of Ghostbusters, but rumors circulated that Bill Murray wanted no part in reprising his role as Dr. Peter Venkman, which complicated matters.
I hate this. I like to torture him.
It went on like this for a long time. Somebody would have an idea for a third Ghostbusters movie that they seemed excited about, and people would talk it up in the media for a while, but eventually it would fall through for one reason or another.
Falling through floors, melting through walls, typical ghost stuff.
When Harold Ramis sadly passed away in August 2014, it put any plans for a true reunion of the original 4 Ghostbusters on hold, and the plan shifted to reboot the franchise with a new cast in a universe where the previous movies didn't exist. Paul Feig was hired to direct, and he brought in his frequent collaborator Katie Dippold, whom he'd worked with on Parks and Rec, The Heat, and Spy to co-write the movie with him. In October 2014, Feig announced the movie would have a female-led cast, which went over well with dudes on the internet, and everybody seemed excited.
Not.
In reality, controversy would dog the film throughout its production and marketing campaign, with fans angry at this new direction, bombarding the movie's IMDb page with 1-star reviews before it was even done filming. When the first trailer was released, it became the most disliked film trailer in YouTube history and the 9th most disliked YouTube video overall, with over 1 million dislikes. Some reshoots were done to address the toxic aura around the movie, and it was slated for release on June 15, 2016. With a budget nearing $150 million and a hefty marketing campaign, Feig stated that the movie needed to make at least $500 million worldwide to be profitable, and then added that that was probably on the low side. The movie was released to mostly positive reviews from critics, but would only gross $229 million, losing the studio an estimated $75 million and putting any plans for continuing the franchise on hold.
I am the cash loser. Are you the bookkeeper?
The Ghostbusters IP wouldn't stay dormant for long, however, as the series has been resurrected once again with the new Jason Reitman-directed Ghostbusters Afterlife releasing later this month.
You know, I think for fans like us, we are looking at all this with goodwill. Like, despite the fact that the new Reitman Kid movie is getting trashed, you and I both wanted it to succeed. Like, Ghostbusters is just a harmless, funny comedy. And yeah, you can get annoyed with it if someone makes a movie that is not funny. You go, oh, that's too bad because I like the first one. But it's just a dumb movie. We want Hollywood to make more original stuff, but I don't know, if you do it good, this movie does it halfway decent. It's nothing that much to complain about.
Yeah, as much as I like Ghostbusters 1 and 2, I don't look at them as pillars of my childhood. And even if I did, the release of a third movie that maybe isn't exactly what I wanted doesn't depreciate the quality of the first 2 movies in any way. I've never understood that argument that a reboot or a sequel that isn't up to your standards somehow ruins the originals. It doesn't work that way. It only ruins it if you let it. Just focus on what you like about the franchise and move on.
And if you're worried about your original idea of the character being ruined, then you don't want Chris Pratt as a character named Peter Venkman, because that's literally stepping on your memory of Bill Murray. Like, to have a different character with a totally different name and it happens to be a woman, that's like, oh, this is good. Now we've moved away from being able to step on all that.
Right. It's more saying that, look, this is its own thing. It's separate. You can treat it without referencing the original, but then the movie does the thing where it references the original constantly. So it is a tight wire to walk. But then, have you watched much of the marketing for Afterlife yet?
No, I haven't.
You haven't seen any trailers or anything?
You know, I avoid trailers on anything that I think I might want to see.
It looks like somebody who like really loves the first Ghostbusters movie being like, look, it's Ecto-1. We're driving it through a cornfield while the sun sets. It looks like Super 8. It looks like a Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
I
heard people say it's like Stranger Things, but Ghostbusters.
It's got at least one of the kids from Stranger Things in it. So that immediately draws that comparison. But that nostalgic vibe is very present. And it seems a little too, I don't know, like treacly for Ghostbusters, which was always a little bit of a cynical, sarcastic, sardonic movie at heart. You know, how can it not be when Bill Murray's the star? Yeah,
Bill Murray brought a lot of attitude to it, and Aykroyd and Ramis writing it. It's salty and saucy as a movie. I went back and watched the original. It's not as salty as I hoped it had been. Like, it was salty for its time, but it seems a little tame now.
Well, everything's gotten more cynical since the 80s, right?
That's true. That's true.
It might have seemed more so when it first came out, but Ghostbusters 2 is just pure like popcorn garbage in a fun way. I still think it's okay. I liked it a lot as a kid. It does not quite hold up, and it certainly does not hold up to the original. I would even say this one's better than Ghostbusters 2.
Oh, okay.
In the long run, not to spoil my feelings about this movie, but I already did when I said it's fine.
It's fine. Like we said, we're going to pick it apart for filmmaking and storytelling reasons, which is what we think you should do with the movies that you watch, and talk about how they moved you or didn't. And this one, it's got a lot of charm to it, and it's got a lot of things that I want to complain about.
Full disclosure, we did watch the director's cut for the podcast, but we have done our best to identify what was only present in the theatrical cut, so we can call out any scenes that we're specifically griping about. If they happen to be director's cut exclusive, we'll try to point that out so you won't be confused if you did see it in theaters and haven't since.
Yeah, we'll try to call some of those things out. I noticed I watched part of it on FX, but their version was in between the theatrical length and the Blu-ray length, which is the one that we watched. So most of the scenes, like, I didn't find any missing scenes in the parts that I watched on FX. But the generic home video version is definitely longer than the theatrical.
I don't think much of anything is added by the extended scenes put back in, but we'll bring those up as we come across them. Do you want to tell us the first leg of this plot?
Yeah, let's jump into this.
All right.
So scientist Dr. Erin Gilbert, played by Kristen Wiig, is trying to get tenure at the prestigious Columbia University, and she's embarrassed by a book she once wrote on ghosts. Her estranged friend and co-author, Abby Yates, played by Melissa McCarthy, reappears in her life, and along with her engineer partner, Jillian Holtzman, played by Kate McKinnon, Abby ropes Erin into investigating a ghost sighting together. The ghost turns out to be very real, reigniting Erin's passion for paranormal research, but the dubious publicity from the incident gets all three of them fired from their respective jobs. So they band together and set up shop on the second floor of a Chinese restaurant and hire a ditzy blonde hunk named Kevin, played by Chris Hemsworth, to be their receptionist.
Good setup. Good first portion of the movie. I enjoyed most of the stuff, right, in this little section?
Yeah, this first chunk of the movie, it's hitting the notes. It's reminding you of what Ghostbusters did. It starts with a scare scene that's divorced from the protagonists, yet sets up the story for later.
Some good Zach Woods stuff in that section. I love Zach Woods. And
yeah, he carries that whole first scene.
He's doing his usual shtick of being bumbly and mild-mannered with a hint of darkness behind it.
Yeah, Zach Woods is great. He gets in some serious peril at the end. He gets locked in the basement, hanging by his fingernails and screaming at the top of his lungs. And the cold open, which was more emotion than I think I've ever seen from Zach Woods before.
Yeah, he's usually quite deadpan, except when he's yelling to shut up about the sun. If you could drop a clip of that in.
Okay.
Shut up about the sun. Shut up about the sun.
But yeah, and I don't even know how to describe like this quote unquote scary scenes in Ghostbusters movies, but this is hitting it where there is some tension, but it's not really scary. You don't have your hands in front of your face watching it, but you can tell they're not completely inept at trying to bring some scares to the screen. They know how to pace this type of stuff.
Yeah, and they revisited the same formula where the ghost that appears starts off as a woman in an old-timey costume and seems intriguing and peaceful and even beautiful, and then screams in your face. That's the same formula, and they did it here, and the effects are even more interesting to look at, so something cool to watch. And then the payoff is that barf ectoplasm on you. That's always been the Ghostbusters thing, and that's pretty much because it's a PG-13 movie, no one's getting killed by the ghost. They're just getting slimed.
Actually, I think one prominent character does get killed by a ghost later on, or dropped by a ghost from a height.
Oh, yes. We're going to get into that. That's a very interesting.
That's a topic we need to discuss at length when it comes up. Yeah. But good tight jokes in this first section of the movie. We got our man, Ed Begley Jr., doing some good deadpan Ed Begley Jr. stuff. Was it Stumpy? Was that his name in Spinal
Was he
Tap?
Stumpy Joe? I
Stumpy
still
Joe?
don't have my drummers sorted out. There were so many of them.
But you singled out the Ed Mulgrave died 15 years ago line. That definitely got an audible laugh from me while I was watching it. And then it turns out that it's his son, Ed Mulgrave Jr.
That was just like a total corny, old-timey kind of joke and just pulled off great. One of my complaints about the movie is the first part sucks you in because there's just a bunch of good jokes like that. And obviously this cast is stellar and they pull them off great. And then later on, it sags both in the narrative pacing and the jokes seem to lean more heavily on the improv of actors busting on each other and vibing and chit-chatting. Did you have that same impression?
Yeah, I did have that impression. And I feel like a lot of those improv jokes land flatter because it's a PG-13 movie. And I feel like when you're trying to handcuff these very funny but adult comedians, you're putting a governor on their talents. You're not letting them hit the full RPMs of what they're capable of comedically.
I know what you mean. It's a safe for kids version of all these people, of Melissa McCarthy, Kate McKinnon. All these guys could be going nuts.
And Feig has a good track record of doing comedy that way, especially with Bridesmaids, which had a lot of the same cast in it. But they were really allowed to let it rip and pretty much say whatever they wanted at any given time. And you could feel that.
Yeah.
And here, maybe they're holding back a little bit because they're in a PG-13 movie. So it works a lot of the time, but there are some misses, some notable kind of improv riffs that go on a little too long or never really hit.
Yeah.
And it's just too bad because this cast is capable of more.
For sure. But like Kristen Wiig is introduced, she's the lead. They spend a lot of time setting up her character and teaching us about how she deals with the world in ways that I didn't feel like really pay off. There's these status game jokes that are played on her for the whole first section of the movie where her department chair is shitting on her, her supposed boyfriend, who you can't even tell is her boyfriend because he treats her so bad.
It's a little ambiguous, yeah.
Yeah. And then they add this scene that I think was not in the theatrical, but this scene with this other professor at this reception who keeps one-upping her and
negating every point she tries to make.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's harsh. And you're like, oh, what did we just learn about this woman?
She's a doormat. It's pretty much what they're trying to say, I think.
She's a doormat and she'll do anything to retain her academic career. And then she's fired and she walks away from her academic career and never looks back. So like, oh.
Right. It does seem to be setting up a motivation that never quite pays off. It feels like the remnant of another draft of the screenplay that
That's
just
a good
got
point,
left in. But we have to mention who fires her.
Yes.
So
an old friend.
The fucking king himself, or Hand of the King, rather. Tywin Lannister, our friend from Last Action Hero, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, a three-peat appearer on the podcast, Mr. Charles Dance, everyone. Round of applause.
Yeah.
Love
in the
the
top
dance.
tier.
He's got to be up there. He's not up in Keith David land yet. He doesn't have 4 appearances, but he's our second most frequent appearance appearer.
We don't have I don't know. We don't have a good word. It's always hard when we try to talk about this. We try to keep track of how many times people have shown up in our movies. And it's always interesting to us to see these actors get dragged into our zone over and over.
Yeah, I tend to go in spurts where I won't update the spreadsheet for 3 weeks and then I'll go in and just add a bunch all at once, which I'm sure you've noticed is how I do most of my work for the podcast.
Yeah, it's a way of life.
It's a way of life for me. Yeah, I have ADHD. I just procrastinate until the last minute and then do too much work. But yeah, so Charles Dance, like, good cast, man. Just in this first section alone. Ed Begley Jr., Zach Woods, Charles Dance in minor roles.
Yeah. And we'll get to a whole other list later. They overcast this movie. Like, this was one of the ways that I think Feig overindulged is he's like, I've got this flagship property that everybody loves. Everybody wants to be in it. Everybody from the first movie wants to be in it. Everybody in Hollywood wants to be in it. And so he hired everybody. It's a little too much. There's scenes where there's too many faces that you know playing little roles.
And not everyone gets time to shine. They just pop up and like, hey, I know that guy. And then they're gone again. They don't quite land as cameos should have a purpose outside of just drawing attention to the fact that it's an actor you recognize. franchise.
Yeah, Michael K. Williams shows up. Fantastic actor. Gets a couple canned lines where he plays a tough guy agent. And then his main thing is he's in the front row for the big choreographed thriller dance scene. That's how you use Michael K. Williams.
Which wasn't even in the theatrical movie. It just played over the credits, I think, in the original cut.
Yeah, how weird is that?
It's always extremely bittersweet to see Michael K. Williams in anything right now.
I know. That's tough, man.
It's still fresh. Yeah, and his partner is Matt Walsh, another comedy stalwart that probably could have had more to do in this movie if they just maybe combined that into one role. And, I don't know. There's different ways they could have handled it.
Yeah. Interesting, the extravagance of this movie. I think that's its undoing.
Well, it cost $150 million. That budget went somewhere.
Yeah.
We got to talk about Kate McKinnon. We've talked about Wiig. We haven't really talked about McCarthy yet either, actually. I like both McKinnon and McCarthy in this movie quite a bit. I think they're both doing good work that's a little deadpan, a little drier than a lot of at least what McCarthy's been known for.
It's nice. They don't go too over the top. They actually present as real friends. Like you can buy the friendship part, even though a lot of the comedy in this is broad. The friendship works. I love, there's a very feminine dynamic to their relationship, right? Because they have this real beef, or at least Kristen Wiig's character has this real beef with Melissa McCarthy's character. And yet, it doesn't come to this masculine go into blows kind of thing. They work it out. Did you feel like there was a feminine energy to the way that the problems were solved in this movie?
Yeah, they talked stuff out and actually addressed the part of the problem. Yeah, men could never.
It was very cool. I'm like, oh, look at these examples that women are setting for us. Thank God that's what we get to watch this time around.
And then Kate McKinnon's just in the corner making queef jokes. In the first 30 minutes of this movie, there is a queef joke from Kate McKinnon.
Boy, yeah, that was...
Did not see that one coming.
And Erin did not hear it coming until she had her face leaned into the tape recorder there.
It's a little cruder than what I've remembered from the Ghostbusters movies of my youth, but that doesn't mean it's unwelcome. It certainly was shocking, but sometimes you want your comedy to surprise you.
They let Kate McKinnon go to town, and she's such a character. It's fun to watch her just be quirky, and the quirky meter is off the charts.
She's not quirky. She's insane, but she's also a crazily efficient and talented scientist based on how quickly she spits these gadgets out and with what little resources she has.
Every 5 minutes, she's re-engineering them and handing them out again.
Making fixes on the fly. It's pretty impressive, but you had a good point about how well they characterize McCarthy's character, Abby, just with this running joke they have about the wonton soup from her Chinese restaurant order.
It's funny how different the two are because they're almost co-leads in this, right? Although we start from the Kristen Wiig Erin character and spend a lot of time with her, and they hammer the character stuff and it's heavy-handed. And then you meet Abby, and in the same scene where Abby and Erin are reuniting and dealing with their actual relationship issues, Benny, the Chinese restaurant driver, is there standing shoulder to shoulder, and Abby is fighting with him. And that's how we learn all about her personality, how she deals with this constant struggle of getting enough wontons in her soup. And it's great. It's so efficient. And neither one of those plot things feels heavy-handed because both of these things are playing side by side. It's really great writing in contrast to how stiff and clumsy the other setup is.
Yeah, and we have to shout out Benny too. Great performance by Karan Sani. From most people will recognize him from the Deadpool movies, but he's a very funny actor. He's been in a lot of great stuff, and he just has this very lived-in back and forth with McCarthy. It feels like these two have been doing this dance for years, even though you're only walking in. And that's always impressive, and it does a lot of heavy lifting for kind of background for these characters when you're able to convey that.
That's a great point. His character could also be overly broad and over the top, but he made it feel very comfortable. And
yeah, Chris Hemsworth enters the movie is a little bit of a shot of adrenaline for the film. I thought he brings something for the Ghostbusters to rally together about, specifically how stupid he is, but in a very harmless, most of the time, an endearing way. And of course, he's a bit of eye candy for the movie, and Wiig's character is immediately taken with him. But I love to see Hemsworth flexing his comedy muscles. This is pre-Ragnarok, so maybe we weren't quite aware of how funny he could be at the time.
You could just feel how much fun he's having in this role. It's such a silly character. It's fun because it's a really obvious flipping of a stereotype. He's a ditzy blonde receptionist, and it's written so over the top. My only problem with it is that they took a little bit too long rolling it out. He comes in for this interview, and there's a lot of beats to that scene before we realize that he's not all there. And each one is funny and dumb. His dog, he's like, "Can I bring my cat?" And he's like, "No, my dog is named Mike Hat." There's just so...
Michael Hat, yes. Yeah. It's a very stupid joke, but it still made me laugh. His bit with the logos that he's designed for them is Probably the hardest I laughed in the whole movie. He just holds up the 7-Eleven logo, and then there's the hot dog over the house.
Just goofy. For me, I got a little tired though, because you know how I usually say, like, I watch a movie and I did one rewatch and then I went a second time through, and I usually go, I warm up. I come down to the movie's level and I get more patient with it and I enjoy it more. My rewatch on this, I got less patient, because that's my problem with this movie, is that it drags too long. And so second time through that scene, I'm like, guys, you could have just cut some of the jokes and got to the point. And
yeah, that's a very valid criticism. Even the theatrical version of this movie was damn near 2 hours long, and there's no fucking reason that needs to be the case. There's a lot of fluff in this movie. We already mentioned it with all the cameos, but yeah, maybe some of the Kevin interview scene could have been cut. But you know what? I don't care. I like it. I like it all.
Yeah, it's fun.
Give it to me.
All these characters are people, when you see their face on screen and when they're doing fun stuff, they win you over. So all you have to do is have a slightly open heart. And these are all such great actors, such great comedians.
Yeah. Is there anything from this first section you wanted to talk about before we move on to Act 2?
I just wanted to shout out Steve Higgins, who many people know.
It's Jimmy Fallon's little buddy, right?
Yeah. He's a producer on The Fallon Show. He's a writer on Saturday Night Live at the same time. Somehow, I don't know how this man finds time for all this stuff. He can be obnoxious as a personality, but for some reason, Steve Higgins plays the dean of the Kenneth P. Higgins Institute, where Abby works, but he's named Dean Sharp in the movie. And he has this funny sparring session with Abby as he fires her and flips her off numerous times. And I just thought he was a great foil for her character.
I did like that the reason he fired them is because he actually forgot that they were even there. And when their YouTube video blew up, he remembered that they worked there and he had to fire them now. That was a nice little twist. All right, so let's jump into the second act of the movie here. An MTA worker named Patty Tolan visits the ladies after seeing a ghost in a subway tunnel. She takes the crew back to the spot and they use Holtzman's laser to try and capture the ghost, but it gets away. They also find evidence that a sophisticated device has been planted there with technology not unlike their own. Patty makes her case to join the team and provides them with a set of jumpsuits and a hearse she borrowed from her uncle. Holtzman teaches them how to use some new equipment she made, and the newly crowned Ghostbusters go out on a call to investigate a sighting at a rock concert. At the venue, they successfully capture their first ghost. Aaron realizes there's a pattern to the ghost appearances, and they head to an old hotel at the very center of it all. They confront the hotel's janitor, Rowan, who's been planting these devices to stir up a legion of ghosts he plans to unleash on New York City. But as the cops arrive, Rowan electrocutes himself and dies, and the Ghostbusters head home thinking that the threat is over.
Kind of anticlimactic if you buy into the misdirect there that was the end of the story.
What are we, like 46 minutes in at this point, though? It was pretty clear there was more going to happen when Rowan electrocutes himself. But yeah, this is, I guess it could be considered a fake out if you've never seen a movie before and don't know how long they're supposed to be.
I feel like that point was longer. So I was watching the time. I think it was probably about 45 minutes after the rock concert.
Oh, so this section of the movie is just long. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much plot.
So maybe we're like an hour and 15 when he kills himself.
That's what I would guess.
Still too early to wrap it up that neatly, but yeah, maybe a little closer to realistic.
Especially if you know there's still an hour of film left after the 1:15 mark.
When I checked it, I was like, Jesus Christ, this movie does not need to be this long. That's really my main criticism of it. There's just too much going on. Too many scenes of Rowan being like brooding and weird. Like we get the idea pretty much from his first appearance who he is. We don't really need to see him being the nerdy, downtrodden guy as often as we do.
Yeah, and he's well cast. The actor's name is Neil Casey. For a guy that wasn't in anything really big before this, he had to carry a big part of this film, and he's got a face and an attitude that just works. Like you're saying, doesn't need that much. You see his face, and you're like, that's the bad guy. He's a fucking creep, and I get it.
I really liked him, and it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but it's a very underseen show, but it just got added to Hulu. It was a YouTube TV show called Champagne Ill with Sam Richardson and Adam Pally and Jay Farrow. And it was one of those shows like Cobra Kai that YouTube made when they were trying to be a TV station. And then they gave up and promptly sold all the rights to everyone. So Champagne Ill just got added to Hulu recently. So check it out if you like Neil Casey in this movie, or if you like any of those other actors I just mentioned. It's very funny.
Nice recommendation. I gotta check that out.
So he does a good job playing the villain of this movie. His motivation is just maybe a little foggy. He just doesn't like people.
It's generic. It's, yeah, I'm a loser and I hate everybody and I'm going to kill everybody and I'll be the winner. I don't know. Not good enough.
It's a little thin. Villains have never really been, or at least villains with depth have never really been the star of Ghostbusters movies. Got Zool. I guess you could argue the EPA director was the villain of the first one.
Yeah.
And Vigo the Carpathian, not exactly the most three-dimensional character. Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's, I guess, true to the spirit of the series.
So we should talk about Leslie Jones.
Leslie Jones.
She stands out in this, and that she plays this role that's the anchor. She comes from outside the world of these other three people who are in their paranormal investigator world. And so she sort of grounds them in some reality. And I just loved her in this. I don't expect that much from her just based on knowing her from her SNL time where so many of the sketches are thin. And she actually brought some of the most humanity to the Ghostbusters, I thought.
Yeah, I've never really connected with her as a sketch comedian as much. I always enjoyed her Weekend Update appearances where she's a little more conversational, and maybe that's why I like her better as an actor than a sketch comedian. But yeah, she can go big when she needs to, but it's not like she's dialed up to 11 the whole time. She is really just like a wholesome, nice person in this movie. And she's pretty normal. She just has maybe slightly too deep an affection for the history of New York, but it comes in handy, and, it works as a plot device and also as a character element. So yeah, every time she was on screen, I pretty much was on board.
She gets these punchlines where you could have gone big with the punchline, but she goes kind of human with them. I just really liked her choices.
Yeah, so I call Leslie Jones a value add for this movie.
For sure.
Really, all four of the main Ghostbusters put in solid performances. I have no issue with any of them. Most of the issues we have are with pacing, I would say, right? That's fair to say. And also, I really hate this fucking heavy metal rock concert scene. I texted you about it while I was watching it. I was like, this fucking sucks. Yeah. It's so cheesy. It's a rock concert from the point of view of someone like, I strongly suspect Paul Feig or Katie Dippold have never attended a rock concert in their lives.
You wouldn't think that until you saw the scene. And they're pulling stereotypes out of their ass.
Stereotypes from long gone, like decades. These are like 70s and 80s stereotypes. And I guess charitably, you could say they're trying to ground it in the era of the original movie, but that doesn't make sense because the rest of the movie is quite contemporary.
Yeah, everything's weird in this scene. The music's weird. The lead singer of the band is weird, who I think is the voice actor who does Slimer. He looks miscast. The band doesn't make sense as a band.
Well, you see the crowd and you're expecting like Slayer or something to be on stage, or Black Sabbath or Ozzy Osbourne, because they keep calling it Ozfest. First of all, Ozfest would never be in this small of a venue. Second of all, then this band starts playing and they're like barely Hoobastank. Like they're not like a very hard rock band. They're kind of butt rock is the term I would describe them as.
Okay.
Not sure if you're familiar with butt rock, but it's like
did not know that term, no.
Theory of a Dead Man and Puddle of Mud, like that kind of genre is where I would place them. The whole tone of the scene is off for me. Even the Ghostbusters themselves interacting with the crowd and the band, it all felt off.
Yeah, because the main joke is that a big green ghost demon appears and the crowd and the singer believes it's part of the band's show because they're so metal and everything is so metal.
But they're not so metal.
But they're not. Yeah, that's what undercuts the whole thing. And then the demon throws the lead singer of the band violently into a stack of amplifiers where he's clearly hurt and the crowd giggles and cheers excitedly. A lot of weird stuff that doesn't add up happens.
I just don't understand. You have all this money. You're paying all these people to show up in your movie, all these actors. You're throwing money at them. You have Ozzy Osbourne standing off to the side. You could just have fucking Rob Zombie show up and be the band playing at the concert, right? You could have Slayer playing. Airheads had White Zombie play in their movie, a movie that probably had a $4 million budget. I don't know if you remember, there was a little Brendan Fraser movie from the early 90s that we'll cover at some point.
I remember the box cover, but I have not seen it.
But yeah, like, why is this where you skimp out? This big set piece. It just felt like a bad choice. I'm harping on this, but that's because I love heavy metal music, and I feel like this movie misrepresented it.
No, it did. It was not its greatest moment.
Probably the low point of the movie for me, aside from the dance scene, but that was, again, cut out of the theatrical version. So
somebody made a good choice. But talking about extra scenes, my main complaint with the pacing of this movie is that for every chapter in the evolution of the Ghostbusters, they make one attempt and fail to catch a ghost, and then they succeed at catching a ghost. And these are all these big beats in the story. And each time after something big happens, they come back and do what I call a fallout scene, which I took that term from a screenwriting guru named Matt Bird that I really like. And one of his main points is don't do fallout scenes, cut them, show the action, show the characters doing the next thing, but don't come back and show the characters reacting to the thing that just happened. We know it happened.
Like the scene back at home base where they talk about the thing they just saw.
They keep going back to home base and go, you remember the thing that just happened to us? I hate that happened to us. And it's like, yeah, we know. We expect that you hate it. Show us what you're doing. And eventually they get there, but every scene has 3 beats within it where it's, oh, we're happy. The good thing just happened. We do a dance party to Up in Here. And then we do a neutral thing where Holtzman teaches us about some new equipment she made. And then we finally get to the plot point, the next thing that moves the plot forward. And it's like that pattern just keeps happening. You're like, man, there's a lot of fat in this movie.
Do you think that stems from filmmakers just not trusting their audience to follow a movie if they do a more of a show don't tell scenario.
It could be that, or it could be just there's an attraction to wanting to have your actors emote and show their feelings on screen. It just seems indulgent to me, like, oh yeah, let's do another dance scene where they celebrate the good thing that just happened. And it's fun because all these guys can do silly dances and it's kind of a laugh, but it's tiring.
Yeah, this is a movie where I must admit I did find myself checking my watch a few times. And it's probably for reasons like that I maybe didn't recognize on the surface level. But at some point I was like, oh, all right, doing this again. You know, it gets in your head. Even if you don't realize what you're doing, you're reacting negatively to what the movie's showing you because you're getting sick of it.
And not just the emotional parts, but even the technical parts. They keep doing scenes where Holtzman reinvents some gadgets and they test them out. And they don't just test them out. She teaches you about them. She talks about them in the lab. Then they go to the alley and then they do some slapstick where the weapons are too powerful and people get thrown
They've done
around.
millions of dollars of damage to this alley, by the way. Completely destroyed this fucking alley.
But they literally repeated those beats twice. She said, I upgraded the gear. Let's go to the alley. They tested it. Melissa McCarthy flew around the alley. Then the movie went on. They had their successful test at the rock concert. Then they met the mayor. Then they came back to the alley again with more weapons and got thrown around the alley again. Like, guys, we've seen the alley routine.
Those could easily be throwaway lines right before the next battle where Holtzman just, oh, by the way, I did this
watch
to the
out.
weapon.
I've got a crazy thing. What the heck is that? And then you get to see it in actual action instead of diluting it by doing a goofy scene with it beforehand.
No, that's very valid criticism. Yeah, as we talk about this movie, we're just uncovering our main issue with it is pacing. It's too long and it's got some redundant stuff in it. But I want to reiterate, we still like this movie.
We still love you, Ghostbusters. You're the one we're going to call, but we're going to complain when we get you on the phone.
And on that note, let's bring up something else I was annoyed by. Dr. Martin Heiss, played, of course, by Dr. Peter Venkman himself, Bill Murray.
Yeah.
What was your take on this character arc or lack thereof?
It's kind of a fake out because you're like, Bill Murray as a weird, snooty guy with an outrageous outfit. This is going to be juicy.
With his grandma's hat, right? Was it his mom's hat or his grandma's hat?
One of those. It's silly, but then kind of nothing happens. He plays a good skeptic and he says, I don't believe you guys. And he's an ass, which he's good at being.
Bill Murray, famously good at being an asshole. Yes.
But then like, yeah, what was it for? Literally nothing happens from it. This is the guy that we talked about is the one guy who really gets walloped by a ghost.
It's killed by him, right? As far as I could tell.
It's really unclear.
There's a lot of ambulances on the scene after he gets dropped out of the window.
He flies out of a second-story window. He's thrown out by the demon ghost. The four of them, I'm sure they shot some version of him on the ground. I'm sure that's in there somewhere and they decided to leave it out. But there's a long shot of the four of them come to the window and their faces evolve into dubious horror to the remains of Bill Murray on the ground there, but they don't say. And then, yeah, there's cops and ambulance, but the cop is mouthing off and making jokes. So if he was at the scene of a dead guy lying 15 feet away, would he be making jokes?
I mean, this is New York.
Okay.
Hey, I'm joking here. Who's to say? Yeah,
always
depends on the
joking,
cop, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole Bill Murray character could have been cut and it would not change the movie fundamentally in any significant way, right?
That's true, which is fine for a cameo, but you would have liked him to have some impact. It's like he almost ties back to Erin's intro thing where she's like, when there are figures of authority from academia, I must bow to them every time. And so she falls prey to releasing the ghost when she shouldn't, when Abby's trying to get her not to, is because she can't help but try to impress these authority figures. And that's interesting, except that it has absolutely no impact. That's just one ghost that got released. It killed off Bill Murray and it flew away and it shows up later, but it's not the key ghost. She didn't let the villain out of a trap so that he could continue on. Like he would have gone on just fine, right?
And shortly thereafter, literally thousands of ghosts get released anyway. So what's one more?
It's just one more.
It doesn't really have any impact.
It's weird. They should have trapped Rowan or his key guy in there. So then there would be like, oh, now this is ironic. The hero had the villain and she let him go, but she just let a random demon go.
Exactly. You just solved the problem. Yeah. Make that matter. Make it mean something.
Yeah.
But no.
Missed
and
opportunity.
then there's a really bizarre scene that I wanted to talk about. It is only in the extended cut with Chris Gethard, who plays a internet, was he like a paparazzi or just a guy?
A blogger or something?
A blogger.
He says something about it's going on my blog.
Who accosts Kristen Wiig's character on the street, yells at her about, you know, her past as Ghost Girl, which is like the least offensive nickname anyone's ever had. I don't understand why it's such a touch, like such a touchy
but she
thing.
hates it, obviously. Sets her
But he
off.
makes a line like, oh, they should have sent you back to therapy. And she punches him in the face. And this is another thing, like with the heavy metal scene. Like Paul Feig's opinion of therapy and how it's viewed by the public seems stuck in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
No one's treating therapy as like a taboo thing to take part in 2016. Certainly not people of this age.
Yeah, if you saw a real ghost as a child, you would hope that you would get a chance to go to therapy. It sucks that she was not believed by her parents. So I get that she has some trauma left over from all that stuff. But yeah, it's a weird thing to have it turn on, that particular thing being used as the ultimate insult. And just weird that it was like a character moment for her where she finally breaks out of her meek shell. But it also didn't earn anything to punch the random blogger who just showed up 30 seconds earlier. Doesn't mean anything. And
she's already unemployed. She's not going to lose her job now.
Yeah.
The Ghostbusters certainly aren't going to fire her.
But of course, let's not forget, they did a fallout scene for that. She goes back to the headquarters. She opens the New York Post and laments the photos of her punching Chris Gethard. So they made the most of it.
And then, of course, there's Mayor Andy Garcia. I swear to God, what the fuck is going on with the cast of this movie? And his aide, Cecily Strong, another SNL alum. This is like half the cameos we're talking about. Like, we're not even through all of them. We're not going to have time to talk about them all. There's so many people in this movie. Didn't we already see Janine's already popped up by this point too, hasn't she? Because I thought she was like the front desk worker at the hotel Rowan's at.
Yeah, that's true. She sends them down to the basement when they meet.
So we've
Rowan.
already seen Janine. Janine, by the way, looks great. Barely aged today.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's another one. I guess that Rick Moranis was the only person in the world that declined to reprise his role for this movie. But yeah, they're just throwing faces at us that we recognize. And it gets to be a bit distracting after a certain one.
Yeah, when it's Andy Garcia and Cecily Strong and Matt Walsh and Michael K. Williams all sitting around in the office with the 4 Ghostbusters, it's like, guys, there's too many people in the scene. What's going on?
Maybe that's just our COVID-addled brains being like, you got 8 people in this office? This is insane. But
and they're all known faces. It's rich. It's a very rich buttery sauce that's all over this movie.
It's the thing I hear old people say all the time. Like, this is too rich for me. And I never understood it because you know what? I like rich foods, but I think I started to understand what they're trying to say when they say that.
Yeah.
It's a little too much after a certain point. It's going to give me a tummy ache.
It could.
All right. Do you want to walk us through the third act? Not the end, because this movie actually has 4 acts.
Yeah. Let me tell you what happens in the supposedly third and final act. So Aaron realizes that Rowan killing himself was all part of his plan, and she goes to warn the mayor that more ghosts are coming, but he won't listen. Meanwhile, at Ghostbusters HQ, Rowan's spirit possesses Abby and starts breaking stuff until Patty slaps him clear. But Rowan takes over Kevin's body and heads back to the hotel where he opens his portal, letting a horde of ghosts come out and terrorize Midtown Manhattan. Ghostbusters arrive in the chaotic scene for a final showdown. Rowan transforms into a gigantic version of the Ghostbusters logo mascot. And to defeat them, the team steers the Ecto-1 into the portal, causing it to reverse polarity so it sucks up Rowan and all the ghosts. Rowan grabs Abby as he's sucked in, but Aaron dives in after her, and the others pull them out, saving their friends and all of New York.
Rowan possessing Abby is a disgusting scene. This scene is gross as fuck, right? Like, I was just like,
I was disturbing.
Shocked. Yeah, it's upsetting.
It is, yeah. And in a good way. I felt like a movie, even comedies that have this thriller element, there should be some moment in there where you actually go, oh, yuck, yikes, this is bad, this is dangerous, this is gross. And Abby, as she's starting to get taken over by Rowan, bright green ectoplasm starts oozing out of her nose and out of her ears, which is maybe the more disturbing part of it. Like, her brain is filled up with it and it's leaking out. And then she starts barfing it all over the ladies' room. It's gross, but I ended up deciding that I liked that. I thought like that was a bold choice and I applaud it.
Yeah, it does drive home the seriousness of the situation at that point, which helps because the movie's been so sarcastic and dry and flippant about most of what's going on up to that point. So it does raise the stakes and snap you out of it a little bit. And, oh, okay, something's really happening here.
Yeah, something bad's happening.
But then the rest of this whole section from this point is basically just CGI monsters stampeding through a city, and there's not much more to it. And it drags on for quite a while and loses me.
We tried to do the summary pretty tight. There's just a million little plot points in there. My comparison was like, it becomes an Avengers movie in this third act. It takes very seriously that it needs to set up all these different battles and show you where everyone is, and everyone needs to get from here to there and fight all these different things, and they need to be escalating levels of bad.
Kevin is possessed for quite a while.
Yes, especially in our cut where he spends 10 minutes dancing Thriller with the cops and the army.
Not this movie's finest moment, no. And then, of course, we have a original Ghostbusters cameo in this section of the movie, too. How does Aykroyd pop up in here?
I don't know how I feel about Aykroyd. So Erin gets separated from the others. She's wandering the streets. The ghosts are flying everywhere. She tries to hail a cab, and it's Dan Aykroyd. And I actually, to the extent that Aykroyd might have contributed to defining his cameo role, I'm going to give him kudos because it's fucking short and sweet.
It's blinking, you'll miss it, honestly. Like, it's so short. I think I missed it the first time I watched this movie. And then I was like, wait, was Dan Aykroyd not in this movie? And then I went back and I was like, oh shit, there he is.
There he is, yeah. It's nice. He's like, yeah, no, I don't go that far south and I ain't afraid of no ghosts. And then he screeches off and you're done with him. And you're like, oh, that was Aykroyd. That's cool.
Famous vodka impresario, Dan Aykroyd. He's got Crystal Skull vodka. That's his big business now.
Oh, he's Crystal Skull? I didn't even know that.
You know what? It's terrible. It's bad vodka, but it's a cool ass bottle.
Yeah.
But yes, so now we've got 2 of the original 4, and obviously Ramis is not going to pop up. He sadly passed away by this point. The cameos are far from over, though. We've still got the last section of the movie where a lot of them are thrown at you one after another.
You want to tell us how this movie wraps up after it had finished wrapping up?
After it's wrapped up for the second time? This movie ends a lot. We talked about how John Carter keeps beginning. This movie keeps ending.
Yeah.
So in the epilogue and post-credit scene, the mayor fully funds the Ghostbusters, and they move into the old firehouse headquarters they dreamed of renting earlier. Patty's uncle turns out to be Ernie Hudson, because fucking course it does. Holtzman builds more ghost gear with the help of her mentor, who turns out to be Sigourney Weaver. The city shows its love for the Ghostbusters with a light display. Then Patty hears something on a recording that foreshadows the return of Zuul. Oh, we also forgot Slimer makes a cameo. That counts as a cameo?
Oh, yeah. He was definitely brought back to be
fan service. Yeah. Ernie Hudson's cameo, I thought worked. I don't know why. Because he's referenced, I guess, throughout the movie, and that kind of builds up some anticipation for it.
Yeah. It would have been good if we weren't so tired. Like, because he's totally likable. He has a short scene that makes sense, like you said. But I was just like, okay, yeah, Ernie Hudson.
I unabashedly just love Ernie Hudson, though. So I'm always happy to see him pop up and stuff. And he's lovable. Available. Don't get me wrong. Like, you can hire Ernie Hudson. He's out there. So yeah, that was good. But the Weaver stuff, I don't know. I'm not so sold on that being worthwhile.
It didn't even make sense. You couldn't even tell if her character was more serious than her mentee, Holtzman, who's an absolute nutcase. Or maybe they were hinting that the Weaver character was actually just as kooky and is the source as a mentor, not just in the science, but in the kookiness. But she actually plays a joke like both ways, like back and forth. And I couldn't tell what they even intended for that character.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, that the tone of that scene is hard to pin down and the purpose of her character, because I don't think I laughed once during this whole exchange, which most of McKinnon's jokes in this movie landed for me. And this one just fell flat.
It was awkward.
Yeah. I don't want to say it was like embarrassing to watch. That's too strong of a word, but like I got secondhand embarrassment from watching it a little bit.
If the actors weren't so good and you didn't have so much goodwill for them already, it might have been more cringeworthy.
And we just saw Sigourney Weaver reference her past in movies in a much better way in Cabin in the Woods. So maybe my goodwill for this type of chicanery was at a low point.
Tank was running low.
Yeah. And then they foreshadow the return of Zuul. I guess that's almost a cameo. Zuul almost makes a cameo.
Almost,
but of course, we will never get that movie.
No, and that epilogue makes sense. Okay, you're doing a franchise movie. The very last thing you show has got to actually set up the story for next time. So I'm like, okay, that had to be there. But all the other things, like just celebrating, yes, we're moving into the firehouse. Okay, but the movie's over. Do that in the next movie or something.
Right.
Like, why are we still here?
The next movie that would never come.
Yeah.
I did want to call out that bar that they're drinking in at the end of the movie. It looks fantastic. If anyone knows what bar that was, I would like to go visit it. I think it's in Boston.
I thought you were about to tell me what it was. Oh, okay. It's in Boston. Not actually.
No, I tried to Google it. I couldn't find it. No, most of this movie was shot in Boston, except for some, landmark exteriors they had to do in New York. But yeah, if anyone knows what bar that was, where it looks huge and there's many taps, I would like to know. I'm not too far from Boston these days. I'd like to go visit it.
Boston Blastoids, please chime in.
I know there's a few. But yeah, so the movie wraps up and you have to ask yourself, is this what everyone was so upset about? This is what everyone was so worked up about. This perfectly harmless, fun, not exactly breezy at 2 hours and 13 minutes, at least the cut we watched. But this movie's fine. I laughed. I smiled. I enjoyed myself by and large.
Yeah, it was fun. And as much as I said I lost patience with it, I still, if I picture any one of those lead characters, I have good feelings about them. I'm ready to laugh at the next thing they say.
I would have loved to have seen a follow-up to this, but it sadly was not meant to be because, as Feig said, the movie needed to make at least $500 million worldwide to get a sequel, and It did not. It bottomed out at $229 million, which didn't even double its budget.
Which on its own, it sounds like a funny place to bottom out at over $200 million. But so, yeah, this was a very expensive production. And
these are pre-COVID numbers, by the way. $229 million used to not be a lot of money for a $150 million blockbuster. Now, if Dune makes that, we're thrilled that we're going to get Dune
that would
Part
be
2.
nuts. Yeah.
I think it did, though. I think it made like $200 million already worldwide. It's doing well in China, I believe. But part of the reason this movie didn't make as much money as it could have is it was not released in China, by and large.
Oh, okay.
China does have a complicated relationship with movies about ghosts. As you know, censorship is a big deal in China. And there was a BBC writer, Ao Wen-jin, who talked about the role of ghosts in Chinese media and how they're handled. And this is the quote here that I have. But like many things in China, ghosts are not as simple as they seem. Throughout Chinese literature and history, ghosts have been a metaphor, and evil ghosts often symbolize corrupt government officials. Ghost stories become a political tool anyone can use, and the government found that hard to control.
That's a shame. It's totally unrelated to the actual content of this movie. It's just that it has implications that the government doesn't like.
Right. It's not anything specific about how this movie handled ghosts in general. I think it's just more of a trend that they'd spotted and wanted to put the kibosh on. So, yeah. So that certainly hurts a movie's prospects. These days, China's the biggest box office market in the world. So if a movie doesn't open and do well there, you're hamstrung as far as your earning potential.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah.
I mean, is it a shame? I don't know. It's a shame. You see how much, you see the work they put in. And like you said, we would have liked to see these actors play these characters again. That probably would have been funny.
There was some cattiness on the part of Aykroyd after the film came out and underperformed. He had a June 2017 television appearance where he blamed Feig for the film not doing well. So according to Aykroyd, Feig refused to shoot additional scenes requested by Aykroyd and Sony until test screens demonstrated they were necessary, which cost an additional $30 to $40 million in reshoots. That's according to Aykroyd. Sony would later claim reshoots only cost $3 to $4 million. But then I guess someone from Sony called him and said, hey, you big dum-dum, you shouldn't say things like that. And
tone it down.
He wrote a few days later that Paul Feig made a good movie and had a superb cast and plenty of money to do it. We just wish he had been more inclusive to the originators. It cost everyone, as it is unlikely Kristen, Leslie, Melissa, and Kate will ever reprise their roles as Ghostbusters, which is sad. It is sad.
I can see him getting sad about that and losing his cool. Yeah, I wonder what that means, that he would have been more inclusive to the originators. Because to some extent, you and I thought that he was too inclusive to the originators, put too much fan service, too much original movie service.
I think maybe a hint to what Aykroyd may have meant by that statement lies in the Sony email leaks that happened around this time. Do you remember that whole big story?
Yeah.
There was some emails in those leaks that indicated Ivan Reitman wanted to make a traditional sequel to the original two movies, but Sony executive Amy Pascal wanted a younger director and forced Reitman out to make the Feig movie. And then I'm sure Aykroyd and Hudson were brought on in advisory roles, maybe if they wanted to. I know Aykroyd at least was pretty involved, or at least wanted to be. And I don't know, maybe Feig just didn't listen to his feedback quite as much as Aykroyd thought he deserved. And at the risk of sounding like a catty bitch, when was the last time Dan Aykroyd made a good movie though? So, is that too mean?
No, I think Aykroyd got lucky with Ghostbusters.
He's not a big Coneheads fan?
No, he had a certain talent, but people pumped up his image, starting with the first season of Saturday Night Live, like way above where I always thought it deserved to be.
The first season in general, or his performance on it?
Just him in general as a
sketch performer?
As a performer, as a writer, as a comedy talent. I always thought he was middling and somehow swam his way along with bigger talents to some success.
I wholeheartedly agree. I suspect that's not a popular take though, but at least we'll go down together for that one.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, after its opening weekend, Sony's president of worldwide distribution, Roy Brewer, told The Wrap that, quote unquote, while nothing has been officially announced, there's no doubt in my mind a sequel will happen. And then he expected Ghostbusters will become an important Sony franchise. Feig and the cast were signed on for 2 more sequels. Maybe Ghostbusters will become an important Sony franchise, but not with this director and not with this cast.
Yeah.
Let's see who they opened against. So they opened in second place behind the second week of The Secret Life of Pets.
Oh.
Yeah, the Louis C.K. cartoon dog movie. That's the one. That has not aged well. They made $46 million opening week. Not terrible, but not great for a movie with this budget. Its second week, it would drop to 5th with $21 million because Star Trek Beyond release took the top spot and made nearly $60 million. Then Jason Bourne would debut the week after that and get another $60 million as Ghostbusters dropped to 7th place with about $10 million. And then Suicide Squad would debut with $130 million in the 4th week, and that was that. And Ghostbusters was pretty much pushed out of theaters at that point and never to make another dollar again.
Yeah, it had a short window there to try to catch fire. fire. It seems like even though it didn't have any help, it had some big semi-trucks coming up behind it. As soon as it tried to merge onto the freeway, it got kind of steamrolled. But it had 1 week to
like plant its flag, right?
to plant its flag and show some growth or show some holding. But I guess you're saying Star Trek Beyond was already muscling it over in that second week.
I just think it's interesting that's another like beloved franchise with a hard reboot. And this is the sequel, of course, to the first Star Trek movie, which I don't even think people like that much. I don't think Star Trek Beyond's a very well regarded entry into the Star Trek canon.
Okay.
That's the one where Benedict Cumberbatch plays not Khan. He went on a press tour for months and swore up and down he wasn't Khan. And then, of course, he's Khan when the movie finally comes out. And then Jason Bourne, another late entry into the long-standing franchise. But I guess Jason Bourne was a reboot in a sense because it was the first one in a while, and Matt Damon was back after taking one of the movies off. So that might have raised the hype for it a little bit. And then Suicide Squad was just a juggernaut. And these are all PG-13 movies, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure Jason Bourne, as I know the other two are. So that's cutting right into Ghostbusters' target audience.
Summer blockbuster filmmaking is a tough business, man. Like, you can't just scooch around and avoid all the competition. You could get maybe a better or worse summer to try to compete in, but there's always something big's going to be coming out if you're trying to get those big summer dollars.
I think the whole summer thing is outdated at this point, don't you? Like, just release your movie when you think it'll do the best.
Yeah, I wonder if we can get away from that.
You're already seeing it now. COVID might have forced that idea to accelerate because you're seeing movies now get released in February and March just because, you know, that they can get them out.
Yeah.
And that used to be a graveyard for movies. But now it seems like all 12 months are fair game for big releases, which is good. You don't want there to be a desert for months and months where there's nothing worth going to see.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me. I live in a place where there's no weather, so it makes no difference what time of year you open a movie.
Why would the weather keep you out of the movie theater anyway? Unless there's a fucking blizzard going on. It's got heat, you know? Like, what do you give a shit if it's snowing outside?
I mean, in summer movies, the cool in the theater is the draw, right? That's the original thing, besides the fact of kids being out of school and needing to be entertained in afternoons. Like, the idea is that, yeah, you could go to a movie theater and have a soda and cool off from the summer heat. But maybe it's just me. I don't do things when if there's anything that's going to make my trip to the somewhere be less than perfect, I'm just staying home, man.
I get that. But I've always been a year-round moviegoer. It was never about, you know, air conditioning was nice because I didn't have air conditioning in my house, but it wasn't the motivating factor. The motivating factor was to see a movie, but maybe I'm outside the zeitgeist on that one.
You're hardcore that way. I think there's a lot of casual fans out there.
Yeah. So you want to talk about where the key players ended up going after this?
Yeah, I hope they all had careers after this.
They did, luckily. I think maybe the toxic backlash to this movie being pretty obviously in bad faith may have taken any dirt off their coats about this one. They weren't really blamed for the failure of this movie as much as they might have been if it wasn't for the whole atmosphere around this movie.
Yeah, it was a sort of distracting narrative, which might have helped them out.
Because the movie was well reviewed by and large, so that seems to indicate they made a good movie. Its failures were not necessarily their fault.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that either,
Yeah. So Feig went on to direct the modest hit A Simple Favor, which I hear good things about, but I haven't actually gotten around to watching yet, with Blake Lively. And holiday hit Last Christmas with Emilia Clarke and Henry Golding. Those both did pretty well. And then he's directing a movie for Netflix in 2022, a YA, young adult fantasy movie, The School for Good and Evil. So keep an eye out for that. So he's been working pretty steadily. He's made 3 movies since 2016. I'd say that's good work.
Yeah, that sounds like a good pace.
He's always working in TV as well, so he's staying busy. The stars, McCarthy's kind of covered McCarthy's career because Happy Time Murders came out 2 years later. Her next roles after this were in 2018, she made Life of the Party, barely doubled its budget. Happy Time Murders, enough said. We've already talked at length about that one.
Go back and listen.
Yeah, good episode. Can You Ever Forgive Me? Good reviews, didn't make money. The Kitchen, which was a bomb, savaged by critics, future episode. Super Intelligence, which was a COVID release, mixed reviews. Thunder Force, which was a Netflix release, terrible reviews. I thought that movie was a joke the first time I saw the trailer. I didn't know it was real.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks terrible. And then The Starling, which was a recent release she had, Netflix movie, bad reviews. But she did star in Hulu's limited series 9 Perfect Strangers, which got mixed reviews but was a hit with viewers. It was the most watched Hulu series ever. Hulu original series, that is, one that they actually financed.
I watched the first couple of that and I didn't bring it to show and tell because I'm like, I don't know about this. And her character, this was one of hers that I would say you would probably not like. Did you watch any of it?
No, I didn't check it out. It wasn't really on my radar.
She just has this really vicious, sparring, angry character in this, and it's not that fun, at least as far as I got, and then I bailed out.
Yeah, I don't There's like a gear she hits in some movies that just turns me off. Like I think it was the movie or Identity Theft.
Okay.
Like something about those movies. I don't know. They're not for me. But she's really a hit or miss for me. There's very few movies where I'm just like, oh, Melissa McCarthy's in this and she's fine. I either really enjoy her performance or really don't. It sounds like Nine Perfect Strangers might be in the negative column for me, but maybe I'll get around to checking it out one day.
Yeah.
So Wiig has been all over the place. She did some lowbrow comedies like Sausage Party and Masterminds. I think Masterminds was a bomb. We might be able to cover that at some point. And then she did higher concept bombs like Downsizing, a movie I hate very much, and Mother, a movie I have not been able to finish. Both future episodes, I'm sure. So she seemed like she might have been on a little bit of a downslope there, but then she was cast as one of the villains in Wonder Woman 1984. So that's a pretty big project for her to have a starring role in.
Sure.
The movie was not the most warmly received, but people seem to like her performance in at least the first half of it. And then she is delightful in Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, which she also co-wrote. I highly recommend that movie. It's hilarious.
I got to put that in my list to check out because I know nothing about it.
Yeah, it came out in COVID. I think it was a direct-to-streaming release, but it's very funny. Got a really good Jamie Dornan performance in it, too. Kate McKinnon, still on SNL, still one of the stars of SNL. She's been a breakout star on there for a while, and she finds time to make a ton of other stuff somehow. She made 5 movies in 2016, 3 in 2017 and 2018, and in 2019, she was in Yesterday and Bombshell.
Okay.
So Bombshell is a little bit of a move towards more drama for her, and Yesterday was a mix. It had some comedy elements, but it had some dramatic elements, too. I rather liked Bombshell, but it didn't really make any money. And then she's also the new Miss Frizzle in Netflix's reboot of The Magic School Bus.
That's a cool, iconic role for her.
Yeah, I think she's got the right energy for that, too.
Yeah.
Leslie Jones starred with McKinnon and Wiig in Masterminds in 2016 after Ghostbusters, and she had a voice role in Sing, a movie that I've espoused my love for.
Told me to watch that. Yeah, I gotta get to that one.
Sequel coming soon. Her only live action movie since 2016 is Coming to America, the sequel to Coming to America. She played Mary Johnson, but she is going to be on the upcoming HBO Max pirate comedy, Our Flag Means Death. Does that feel like a wasted title on a comedy? That's such a badass title.
I love it. Is that a movie or is that a series?
I think that's going to be a series.
Okay.
So
Leslie Jones, HBO Max, pirate comedy, Our Flag Means Death. Those are the only 10 words that I know about that, and I'm ready for it. Sounds awesome.
I'm on board. Let's see what I can find out about this show. Upcoming period comedy television series created by David Jenkins. Rhys Darby's playing the star.
Okay.
Taika Waititi is Blackbeard.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Cool.
This is going to be good. Yeah, good cast. Nat Faxon, Fred Armisen. Yeah, this is going to be good. All right, we'll check this out. It's coming. No release date yet. Filming started in June 2021.
Oh, okay.
So keep your eyes peeled for that. Did you have a summation of your thoughts on this movie you wanted to hit us with before we sign off?
I think I touched on this, but I feel like the downfall of this movie is, and I'm going to just blame the director, Paul Feig, for overindulging. He had all these riches in front of him. He had these incredible cast, access to all the stars, a big budget, ability to go balls to the wall on the special effects, and he just luxuriated and all that stuff a little too much. And then he was not ruthless enough in the editing room. He needed to kill another 100 darlings that somehow made it into the final cut and could have brought this down to a tightly paced thing, because this movie is a lot of things. It's a friendship comedy. That's its core. It's a spooky movie. It's an action movie. It certainly has a lot of action, but what it is not is a thriller, because it always takes its time. It never pushes you forward where you're like, oh shit, I'm on the edge of my seat. What's happening? I wasn't ready for this. Something else is happening. It's just always slow and measured. And that's where it falls short for me.
I agree with everything you said. I think it's pretty clear our takes on this movie line up based on the content of this episode. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some deeper concepts with franchises, and especially beloved franchises from years gone by. I think movie studios are making a mistake with conflating that just because something is beloved, audiences want more of it. And I'm not sure that's always the case. Like there are some franchises that people are so in love with that you never really hear anyone clamoring for a new one. Think of Back to the Future, for example, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's asking for a new one because the time's gone, you know? Those actors are either sadly in poor health or way past the age where they originally played those characters. Nobody wants to drudge that up and see some weird Weekend at Bernie's version of that movie. And all the Ghostbusters clamoring for a new one, to my mind, while researching this movie, it seemed to come from like Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson and those guys. I didn't see a lot of fan demand for this movie. I think sometimes you just have to be smarter about what franchises you reboot and resurrect, because so much of the magic of them is when they were made and when people saw them. And that's the most difficult thing in the world to replicate. People's taste changes, movies change. It's never going to be the same. And I think the backlash to this movie shows that there's a lot that can go wrong trying to go down that road. And what's the best case result if it goes right? You know, you make a little money, but at the end of the day, like, you just have to be smarter about what movies you pick to stamp your flag on. And I think this would have been a super fun $70 million movie. Like Men in Black could be considered a spiritual successor to the Ghostbusters without being a Ghostbusters movie. And then you're not so beholden to pay homage to the original. And I feel like that would have been a better direction to go in with this cast and this crew. You could have made a really great movie that didn't have all these expectations attached to it. And we might be here, you know, talking about a new franchise. Well, me and you probably wouldn't be here talking about it, but, you know, there might be a new franchise in our midst that was fun. And I don't know, I'm sad that we didn't get to see that.
When you look at the talent that was lined up, you go, oh, I wish something really big and lasting could have come out of this. But yeah, you're pretty much criticizing the whole Hollywood machine and saying, don't chase the money, don't chase the easy, safe money. But, you know, it's a corporate machine. But
I don't think that money is quite as safe as they think it is, you know? That's the mistake, is thinking that because something is a name people recognize, they're going to go see it. But look at even the Bill and Ted movie they just released. That wasn't a big hit by any means, as far as I could tell.
No, I think you're right. It's a mistake to think that it's safe money, but it might not be a mistake to say it's still not as risky as new ideas. Because no one knows what's good. No one makes decisions based on what's actually good. They can only gauge things and compare them to other things.
So it's like a shortcut to compare it when you already have a built-in reference point.
It's such a refuge to go, well, I know that's good because it made money before. In 1984, it raked in huge dollars. And so I'm holding two things in my hands, and one of them is this thing that made millions years ago, and one of them is a thing that I have to read and interpret and make sense of and compare to all of creative history. And wow, that seems way safer to just grab the old thing.
Yeah, trying to change Hollywood from that granular level is never going to work. I think we will have an auto-correction at some point where this kind of endless parade of franchises and superhero movies will die down, and maybe we'll get back to more standalone movies for adults and stuff. All right, well, thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the podcast if you listen on an app that lets you rate and review. Hit us up on Twitter at BlastZonePod. Send us an email, blastzonepod@gmail.com. We're on YouTube now as well, BlastZonePod on there. You can listen to our podcast while looking at our faces. They don't move, not yet anyway.
No.
But they're there in some ridiculous Photoshop that Ian's cooked up.
Yeah, you can stare at that for an hour.
That's always fun. And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.